I'm Annoushka Dukas, and I've been designing jewellery for 30 years and collecting charms for as long as I can remember. In this podcast, I will be asking a series of extraordinary women to tell me their life story in charms. Welcome to my life in charms. So lovely that you're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For
I'm
coming.
happy to be here.
So there are so many wonderful stories in these charms, and so many kind of details. But the first is all about your childhood. But before we get to that, how did you find this whole kind of thinking about your life in charms?
I mean, my first thought was like, I just started like riffing on ideas, and because I do have charm bracelets and have been collecting charms for a long time, it was like a little bit, I'm sure I was overthinking, like afraid I'd leave something out, or thinking about what all my fantasy charms were that got away, but then going, oh, well, that's not relative to me, like things like that.
But it's so unusual because not everybody has a charm bracelet.
I know,
particularly
right?
Somebody like you who's really collected, vintage in so many ways.
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit of a lost art. People don't make charms anymore, or a lot of people melted down all the great vintage charms when gold prices were high, so they're a little bit elusive sometimes. Yeah. And I used to always think, I would wish I could collect charms the way people did in the old days when you'd travel and you'd find a thing, but like nobody even makes them really anymore. And like when you're traveling, I'm always looking.
Beautiful.
Well, you know what I mean. You go to like a fabulous location and think, I wonder if that jewelry store has a little charm I can add to my charm bracelet. Yeah. And it's very hard to find usually. I think so. Yeah. So you have to go to someone like you who can make all the different kinds of charms.
Because for me, as I said, it's all about the detail. Because you can make a charm, it's just static and it doesn't do the same thing. But when did you start collecting charms?
I'm trying to think. Well, first I got the bracelet. I bought a beautiful Victorian era with the heart shaped. It came in a beautiful heart. The bracelet with the lock, the heart shaped lock, and it came in a really beautiful heart shaped dark green velvet box. Yeah. And it started there, and I just thought, I've always loved charm bracelets, when you see them in old photos, and and I just started from scratch just like that. And I think the first thing I did was maybe buy like 4. I looked mostly on eBay or Etsy and would find things, and I think the first ones were like, I'm going to find a vintage martini glass to represent my act. I'm going to find a vintage car to represent my cars that I collect. And it started just with me thinking of that, like things that were relative to me, telling my story, basically.
I didn't know you collected cars. You haven't got any cars.
Yeah, I know. Well, I had to like stop somewhere. Otherwise, I was going to, it would be 1,000 charms.
So let's start with your first charm, which I think is all about childhood memories. So you said you'd like a lilac flower. So I love the idea of a lilac flower because I thought I could make it individually carved amethyst in the shape of each little individual petal. And so they're carved amethyst flowers with tiny little gold beads in the center, and they're attached by a jump ring to a kind of main stalk, which will be hidden by all the flowers. Wow. And so there's lots and lots of movement, so they'll all move independently. And then the leaf is yellow gold, and it'll be very much textured with all the veins of the leaf. And it will turn round its stalk. So it'll be very playful and gorgeous, I think, actually.
Yeah, very pretty.
But so you said this is to represent your child. So tell me a bit about your childhood.
So I grew up in a small town in Michigan, and we had an old house that we lived in on the corner of a little street, and this house was surrounded by huge lilac hedges.
Lovely.
And all the lilacs were various colors, like white, dark purple, and then that quintessential medium purple. And so in the spring and summer, those lilacs would come into full bloom. And my mother was always cutting the lilacs, but they were everywhere. The entire perimeter of the house, really. And then there was a little, so I just am the scent of them and cutting them, which they're quite hard to cut.
Are they?
Yeah, they have a really they're very woody. They're not
Okay,
easy to cut.
right.
But I just remember like my mom cutting them and me, us using them in decor everywhere. But there's one area where there was a kind of a canopy. It was like I had a little lilac cave, and I could go in there, and it was like my little place where I'd, had a little tree stump and
Play.
yes, it was like my little lilac playroom. And I remember I had a little cat that was very tolerant cat that I could dress her in dresses and bonnets, and she was totally fine with that.
Cat.
Yeah.
Real cat that you dressed up.
And so it's like me and that cat in that little lilac cave. It's one of my favorite memories.
Am I right thinking you're very close to your mother?
Yeah, I was always close to my mother. My mother was a manicurist. And so, like beauty was a thing in our household, even though she was, she didn't wear red lipstick or high heels and all this sort of thing. She was very much like a 70s mom,
Yeah.
But yeah, she loved old movies. So I grew up watching classic films, and that's really what had a big imprint on me with regard to like why I love the 1930s and 40s and 50s so much. It's just sort of like the fact that those movies had a big imprint on me, and it was because she liked watching them.
And did your sisters, because you were two sisters, so did they love it as much as you?
I think that's a good question. I don't think so. I think it was more of my kind of thing.
Right.
Although both of my sisters in their adult lives have gone through phases where they dressed in vintage clothing and wore the red lipstick. Like they went through phases. My younger sister was really into like vintage swing dancing, and she was very good at it. And so we were like around the vintage, it's like they've dipped in and out of it, whereas I kind of just like stayed in it forever. I never left.
Did you always, as a child, so when you're sitting in your little lilac bush enclave, did you always have a vivid imagination?
I think I was an avid reader. I love to read, and funnily, my parents still go like as they tell the story. But when I was first like learning to read and could start getting books at the library, checking out books at the library, I loved reading about English history. And I remember I came home with this big book. My dad loves to tell the story. He's like, you came home with this big fat book about King Henry VIII and his wives. And my dad was like, why are you reading this? And I was like, I don't know. I just want to read it. It's like a soap opera.
So when you were reading, so you were reading the books, but visually, I'm kind of thinking films about that whole era, because obviously corsets and all of that was such an important part of that. I wonder whether that started to capture our imagination.
I did have a fascination with lingerie, and I used to peek into my mother's lingerie.
How old are we now?
I must have been like 7 years old, 6 or 7 years old, but I was so curious about women's undergarments and this secret thing that I didn't get to wear, these lacy things. What is this? And what's so funny is I still have a bra that I stole out of my mother's lingerie drawer.
Oh, could describe the bra.
Well, it's kind of racy, but kind of not. If you know a lot about lingerie history, there was like a period, even in the 30s, where bras had like, and especially if you could imagine in the 70s, like the nipple was free. Okay. And it was, because I remember always seeing like loose breasts and t-shirts. Like nobody cared about it then. It's strange.
Yeah, of course.
And it's like a black bra, like an open cut bra.
With nipple,
it's just kind of like goes like this, and so there's like a little bit of support, but like leaving the shape of the nipple open, which I collect vintage lingerie, and I have quite a few bras from the 1930s that are like that too. But yeah, I somehow swiped that from my mother's work, and I worked in lingerie when I was a teenager too.
We're going to come on to that, but I also read that you were your first bra, you were given some ghastly cotton.
Oh yeah, like it was. You probably don't have. I don't think you have this here, but you must have the equivalent. But we had these things called legs, and it's L'Eggs, eggs. And it was a pair of like shriveled up pantyhose that came in this like egg shaped plastic thing, like an Easter egg, but like this big, right? And it's called legs. And everyone knew about this like plastic egg that came with the pantyhose, but it was very like the shriveled, you know, suntan pantyhose, like not very pretty. And I remember when I was first like old enough to kind of first cover my legs, you know, it's like a rite of passage, right? As a young girl. Maybe back then, I don't know if it's like that now, but, and I was thinking, because of course I was stealing sneak peeks at my dad's Playboys under the bed, and I thought I was going to wear stockings. And also because I'm watching 1940s films and I'm seeing like, you know, little glimpses of the ladies pulling up their stockings, and I'm like, oh yeah, oh, it's time for me to wear leg wear, hosiery. And I got that egg with the pantyhose in it, and I was like, what on earth is this? Like, it was not what I expected. And I did start working in a lingerie store and saved up my money and bought myself my first garter belt and stockings, like not equating it with sex at all.
So just tell me about that. So you went there, but age quite young, 15.
Yeah. So? I think I was maybe like 14 when I first proposed myself to work at the lingerie store, and just said, can I help tag things? And it started like that. I used to, you know, clean the toilets at the ballet studio so that I could have ballet classes. And I was very afraid of asking for things. So I had a job early on.
So your next job was, I've actually put it as your next one was a ballet shoot.
Yes.
Which I guess brings you neatly on to saying what brought that on? You wanted to.
Well, I don't know what made me want to take ballet classes, because I have taken ballet classes for as long as I could remember. I must have been like at 5 years old and dropped off at the, you know, not even a ballet class, but like some kind of movement thing, you know?
Yeah.
My mom was just like, the little dance class.
Keep you occupied.
But then I remember a ballet studio opened in my little town, and I asked if I could clean the toilets in exchange for ballet class.
Wow. Very early signs of being in charge of your own destiny.
Yeah, and really, also realizing early on that, like, not, you know, independence in a way, you know?
It's interesting though. So I love the ballet shoes, and when I looked up, I was like, oh look.
Yeah.
So for the listeners, I'm looking at a ballet shoe that isn't all about. It's not what you imagine a ballerina. It's kind of sexy fishnet tights, and so these are black on point ballet shoes. So I've done them in white gold, but set with black diamonds to represent the satin and we'll put black rhodium so that it's very black. And I've seen the ribbons as black rhodium over white. And they will hang, so they'll move beautifully. And they are, you can see they're crossed at the front. I think that's how you do the ballet shoes up. And on the bottom, on the sole of the leather, which is just very plain, is written Dita Von Teese in your lovely logo, kind of, you know. But I think they'd be absolutely
so pretty,
divine. But it's so interesting to hear how you know why ballet, and you didn't continue. You're far off ballet.
I always, as I grew, I danced my whole life, but I was not very good ever. It was always a struggle for me.
Right.
Although I loved dancing on point. I was very strong. When all the other girls were in tears because it hurt so bad, I was like, this is great. Pointing around, like I loved all of the things about ballet, like the shoes, the costumes, the dramatic makeup. I mean, these are all things that I loved. And
it's very girly.
But also I think, and when I look back, it was very like otherworldly to me. You know, not something you see, like exquisite is the word I think about a lot. And even later in life, when I started performing, all my first burlesque shows I did on point. I was like, I'm going to do a feather fan dance, but I'm going to do it in point shoes. Oh, I'm going to come out of a big powder compact, but I'm going to do it in point shoes. Oh, I'm going to be a ballerina in a jewel box and build this jewel box, and it's going to open, and I'm going to be in point shoes, and I'm going to take off my clothes and point in. So I had a lot of numbers. Even when I was a bird in a bird cage, I did it on point. So I always thought of point shoes as being very erotic. It's like the ultimate high heel shoe.
Okay. So you weren't as good at it as you might have been.
Right.
But then what? What?
Let's see what happened next. Well, not being good enough at it to be a dancer is really what led me to creating my own burlesque career. Like I just somehow like eased my way into that, which I think is not unusual. I think most maybe ballerinas that grew too tall became Bluebell girls and then went to Las Vegas and danced in the topless revues, and I love that. So I always think sometimes the things that you don't expect are the things that lead you to do something totally different than you planned on.
But at some point between ballet and cleaning the loos, and your parents separated, didn't they?
Yeah. 15, 16, 17, I was working in a lingerie store. I had my boyfriend, like, I was wearing all of this lingerie, and it's like kind of I think I actually reconciled this with my dad fairly recently for my documentary, but I was living with my dad and I was working in the lingerie store, and I used to, as one does, wash my lingerie.
Yeah.
And I worked in a nice lingerie store. It was beautiful lingerie. And I'd, hang it up to dry. And my dad was very offended by that and very he kicked me out of the house.
For working in the lingerie store?
Well, for wearing those black lace, which
and
why? And I was of
well,
course like, why is black lace wrong? And years later, I thought oh, it's really interesting what people put on something like that. Like, just because you're wearing beautiful lingerie doesn't mean you're wearing it for someone. It just might, how do you equate?
Feel good about me?
Yeah. What the imprint though of what his thoughts are about black lace lingerie are, and you would go, oh, I had to take that on, and I didn't even understand it. And I kind of had to unravel it later.
Particularly as your mother had it, it seemed like normal.
But could you imagine though? My father probably was not very happy with my mother either.
Well, clearly,
and her black lingerie.
So is that so? I mean, for me, I've drawn it as a gorgeous, gorgeous feminine corset.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I absolutely see it. Again, I mean, I've taken it from your glamour matrix.
Yes, that's the one. I knew it.
You knew it. The reader doesn't know, but I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. It's I've done it in rose gold. It's 3-dimensional, so you absolutely could put a tiny body into it. And it's a complete replica of that corset. Rose gold, dangling suspenders, also with ruby pavé rubies onto it, and the midsection it'll be pierced, the rose gold, so it'll be like lace, and then the bra and the panty section will all be ruby pavé, and I've put a little ruby heart in the tummy button. It'll be a little cabochon.
Pretty.
And then if you look at the back, it's to represent the lace and the bow detail, and I see that as kind of a rose gold wire, and which you could almost pull tighter, which so I think it'll be completely divine, and I think it'll be about 20 millimeters high, so very small, but gorgeous, and good size cups, and I think it'll be absolute heaven. So famously, you managed to get your waist from 22 inches to 16 and a half.
At some point.
Okay.
At some point. I don't think about the numbers very much anymore. When I was younger, I was very like, oh, look at me with my tiny little waist. And then recently somebody came up to me and they said, you're that woman that has a famously small waist? And I was like, oh, that's what I'm famous for on the street. I thought, like, everything I feel like I've done, that's it. Okay, yeah, I guess so. But yeah, I don't, when I was younger, I was very obsessed with having, like, not the numbers, but just like being the fetish model with the tiniest waist. And now I'm a little,
But can I just ask, on a really practical level, I mean, clearly, not very few people will get to that. But how do you actually do that? You just how do you do that? Do you tighten the corset?
Yeah, well, like a true corset.
Yeah.
And the one that you've drawn is a Mr. Pearl corset. And Mr. Pearl is a very important figure. And he's the most, well, he's the most important corset maker of the last 30 years, really. Actually, as of modern times. Like he's the one that when you see all of the Terry Mugler corsets, the Jean-Paul Gaultier, the McQueen, things that are in the museums were made by him, all of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's really incredible. And he makes many of my corsets whenever I can afford it. I feel like he's, he can only make a few things a year.
What does a corset cost at that?
Well, Mr. Pearl's very particular. People are like, people reach out to him all the time and ask if they can, get in touch with him. And he's like, you don't get to even see him unless you're putting down a bank wire transfer, and probably like at the minimal about, 12,000 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And that's like not with all the lace and the rhinestones and all of that. But this is a museum piece. This is like haute couture. This is beyond. This is like real haute couture. Like when John Galliano recently did the Margiela show, he came to my house to look at my Mr. Pearl corsets because I think I have probably the biggest collection at this point that's in one collection, besides like the Mugler collection or the Jean-Paul Gaultier collection or Lacroix. Like anyway, so it isn't, it's really, he's just a master. And there's no competition for him. Right. The one that you've drawn actually has, the bra is separate and laces up actually the same way a corset does. Yeah. And then the corset, this one in particular, it laces in a special way where there's lacing at the top, and I do mine in a special way for striptease, trade secrets. Yeah. And then there's like a loop at the waist. You decide where the waist is going to be, and then you lace the rest, and you pull those two strings in the center, and that's what causes the cinching. What I love is the look of the corset. I like what it does for the posture. I obviously like the drama of it. I like that it's the most difficult item to striptease from. Like I always think about how do I make the striptease more difficult than it should be. I was working on a show, and one of the a costumer that didn't know me said, "Oh, hey, have you ever thought of putting a zipper in those?" And I thought, have I ever thought of putting a zipper in it? Like we sit around and think of like how to make it outrageously complicated, because why would you just put a zipper in it? First of all, the whole point is to take your time and make something like dramatic and otherworldly and difficult. And like, I know I would never put a zipper in a corset more than I'd even put a Velcro in an outfit to get it off. No, never.
So as you were started modeling from I guess from the lingerie store, you started to model for them?
Kind of. Not the lingerie store I worked at. So I worked in this lingerie store, and then I met someone who, like, I saw wearing a corset, and I was like, "Where did you get that?" It was somebody out at a nightclub in the LA rave scene, and she gave me an address. Yeah. And I followed the little map on the address. Yeah. Back when that's what you did before we had yes. And I walked in, and it was a fetish store that made custom corsets. And that kind of changed my life.
Can you, for those people that don't really understand fetish, can you just describe what fetish is?
I mean, it's been around forever, since the invention of the camera, right? Like people have been interested in exotic clothing and bondage, and fetishes run the gamut, right? Of like, people have foot fetishes, people have high heel fetishes. They want to be, stepped on, whipped. They want to be dominated. And I think there's a whole thing of different types of fetish clothing. So like in that, I fell in love with corsetry, long leather opera gloves, and what's called full fashion stockings.
Which
and
are?
full fashion stockings are stockings that don't have any lycra, that were made in the 1940s and 50s.
Silk.
They're not silk, they're like hand finished. It's like a couture stocking. It has a keyhole and a welt. There's like in my first book, there's an anatomy of a full fashion stocking. I go into what it is and why I love it. But there is like a whole world of people who are obsessed with full fashion stockings. If you Google it, you'll get into a wormhole of like, oh wow, you know. So I just became obsessed with these beautiful stockings, and I still am. You know, I'm still very like.
But is the fetish thing? Is it a sexual thing, or is it just? Is it just that, or is it other?
Okay, the true definition of like a fetish would be sexual, erotic in nature, like a real true fetishist. If you were like, I am a true fetishist, if you met that, it means like it would be that fetish that they have is more powerful to them than sex.
Okay.
It's like when you meet a real fetishist, they're going to say, if my wife knew you were smoking this cigarette in front of me, you know, it would be worse than if I was having sex with you. Like, this is like how powerful. So just to give you an example, because, you know, there's people that have fetishes about watching women blow smoke rings. You know, I find it fascinating. I've always known fetishists and been intrigued by them. One of my favorite people in the world, who passed away quite some time ago now, I met him in the early 90s, and he was a heterosexual guy that liked to dress in women's clothing. And I was so fascinated by this idea. And of course I see people come to my shows all the time, and I'll meet couples, and the wife will say something like, this is his first time being dressed in women's clothing in public. My show feels very like a place where people feel like they can do that. But, you know, I think I'm just fascinated by the psychology of fetishism. I think like sometimes people need permission to see other examples of things that they might fantasize about doing, and hopefully they'll try it out for themselves. Like you can always like wipe the red lipstick off and, you know, go back to your blowout and wear your like casual clothes. It's like, it doesn't require surgery.
Absolutely.
To be fabulous.
Absolutely.
You know,
any surgery? Have you had any surgery?
I had my boobs done when I was like 22 years old.
But that was a big deal then, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like I think about how brave I was.
Naturally, were you flat chested?
Well, okay, so no, not really. But what happened was, remember when I told you I was hanging out with all those drag queens and kids in the rave scene?
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
And that will take a toll on your body, especially when you're like 20 years old. And suddenly I was like lost too much weight from too much partying. And I was like, you know,
too many drugs,
doing the drugs, and then got myself together. And then I was sort of like, oh, why don't I do it? And everyone said, don't do that to yourself. And I've never regretted it, you know.
No, it's also very much part of who you are, part of your act. And
to hold these jeweled pasties up, right? You know, and I made that decision back then, and I guess I never looked back. But now I think back and I go, oh, I'd be so afraid. I haven't had any other kind of plastic surgery, and I'd be so scared. Sometimes I think about like, oh, when it comes time to have like, you know, whatever, a procedure, I'm so scared of it. I mean, I wasn't scared when I was 22, you know, thinking about
that was just
like, you know.
But that's so interesting, isn't it? Whether you did it, whether you'd go back and do it now.
I probably would have waited a little bit longer.
Right.
But then again, you know, you can't change things, and
there's no regrets. I mean,
I guess I probably wouldn't change anything, right? Like, I don't know.
It's so interesting that, isn't it? Yeah, I've often asked that.
I don't think about it much.
But then you said, okay, well, my next charm, mini top hat with feather.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Okay, so immediately when I looked at the charm, I thought, oh, this is very like, top hat makes me think of my next tour, which is magic themed. To become a magician, and I had this idea.
There's the tour coming up.
Yes, I had an idea a few years ago about bringing together striptease and magic illusions, and so I started working with some master magicians around Vegas and LA, and you told me earlier that you have learned how to do it. So you can do your magic. Yeah, I have a really fun like grand illusion that I do, that I was trained to do. It's not so easy. I got a lot of bruises when I'm working on that. But so I thought about this top hat, but and my show is called Nocturnal. I'll be in the UK at the Palladium and all around the UK. But it's like my big scale show. But when I thought about this, I look at it, I said, oh, it's the top hat and then the feather, which I dance with feather fans. And so I think about the top hat and feather. But I know I also mentioned to you my favorite era of clothing. I love the 1940s when women wore these whimsical top hats, and I have a big collection of the fedoras, top hats, like whimsical hats on theme, tricorns, all kinds of like trilby hats and things, but scaled to woman size, not like a tiny top hat, but like a really, and I collect these hats, and I have
they've bought
me like 30 years. So, it's my favorite era of fashion, or these 1940s, that era where the hats were really fun and outrageous. So it made me think of both things, though, because when I'm looking at it, I think about my show, but then I know I told you the story of the little hats that I collect.
No, you did. You absolutely did. But I was like, I don't want to do it as a little feather on a hat. Because I was thinking of you and burlesque and your use of huge feathers in on the stage. So the way I've drawn it, as you can see, is I've drawn it I've done it in white gold, that the top hat is 3-dimensional, tiny little top hat. Made me think of that the Monopoly hat a little bit. It's and then the black ribbon is black diamonds around the hat, and then the pink, I've done the feather as a kind of pale pink, graduated from pale pink sapphires to dark pink towards the spine of the feather. And the feather will all be articulated, nice. As far as we can articulate it, because so much of what you're doing is all that gorgeous, sexy movement of the feather. And
I love feather jewelry too. I have quite a bit of, like, whenever there's a vintage feather brooch or necklace, like my vintage jewelry person, and I collect a lot of costume jewelry, right? I love like 30s and 40s era costume jewelry, big jewelry, and she always knows to let me know when there's feathers.
And I'm so interested in the feathers that you have got or collected. Are they articulated?
Because I've never seen an articulated. No, to be honest.
Because there's lots of kind of feeling of movement in those antique feathers. But I love the idea of it being articulated, a bit like a fish. I showed you. These be articulated. So, at what point? You've got to tell me, what point did Heather become Dita?
Well, it started, I was working in a strip club when I was 20 years old.
So are we still in the lingerie shop?
We are.
Moved on?
I'm doing multiple jobs.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm in the rave scene as a dancer. I'm working in the lingerie store, and then sometimes move to the beauty department, and I'm working in the strip club at night. I'm very like
lots of dark, light and dark.
I love it. Yeah. I'm working a lot, and where was I going with that? Oh, when did I? Oh, so I remember when I first started working at the strip club, they were like, oh, yeah, you should pick a fake name. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't know. And they picked out a name for me, and I was like, I'm not going to be called that. And so I had just seen a movie with an actress called Dita Parlo, and I was like, I'm going to be Dita. And so then what happened after that was I was in these what's called the newsstand edition of Playboy. So Playboy magazine had all of these magazines that came out every other month. That was like, they were themes, and it was all the girls that were, some of them were Playboy playmates, but a lot of them just weren't. They were just Playboy models. Yeah. The videos and pose for pictures. And so I remember I finally, I got hired as one of those models. And they said, well, you have to have a last name. And I go, why? Can't I just be Dita, like Cher or Madonna? Like, why do I have to have a last name? And they said, no, you have to have a last name. And I was like, ugh. And I remember sitting at the bar in the strip club with a friend, and pulled out the white pages, which was like the phone book. Everybody's name.
We had yellow pages. We had yellow pages. Yeah.
And so I was like, just had a drink at the bar, and I'm like, oh, I gotta find a last name. Oh, how about something with Von in it? Yeah, that's exotic, Because also, remember, I'm working in the strip club, and I often like to pretend I didn't speak English and that I was from a faraway land. Because remember, I have this black haircut. Yeah. I'm wearing a corset. There's nobody like me, like it's like, you know, the 90s. It's like the stripper 90s. There's nobody like me in there. Okay. I looked very different, very out of place. So I said, I need like an exotic name. So I looked under Von and I found this name, Von Teese. And I called them and I was like, I'm going to be Dita Von Teese, you know, thinking nothing of it.
Yeah.
Then I, you know, go to the liquor store a month and a half later and to get my first issue, and I grab the magazine and I open it. It says Von Teese. That's not right. And I called them and I said, that's not right. And they go, we'll get it right next month. And so next month they did it again and they kept doing it. And the funny thing is, it never occurred to me that it was like an ideal name. It was just like, I never thought like Von Teese. Like, it's just like they missed the R.
They just did you a huge favor.
And I remember one time I was doing an interview years later, and a journalist was like, oh, she's so contrived, even with the name, it's so contrived. And I thought, it's not contrived. It's not contrived. It was an accident. It was a typo. If I had planned it, if I had known I was going to be doing this outside of the strip club and beyond, if I'd known I was going to be trademarking it for my lingerie brand, I would not have done it. I would have come up with some fabulous stage name. But, you know, it was really like, fine. It just worked out the way it did.
It's absolutely, it couldn't be better. It could not be better. We'll go on to our next charm, which is a cocktail glass.
Yeah.
Just tell me about this cocktail glass, because I think for those people that haven't seen your show, I think you need to explain what it is.
Well, I guess I am probably most famous for bathing in a giant cocktail glass. It started with a martini glass. It started as a duet with my best friend, Catherine Delish. We were dancing together. She was in the champagne glass, I was in the martini glass, and we did a dueling striptease where we both ended up in these giant glasses.
Was she called Catherine Delish, or was that a made-up name?
Yeah, that's it.
Surely.
It's a very good made-up name, yes.
Yeah.
So there we were, like, touring across the country, like, doing this dueling glasses act, and and she's a very special person to me too, because she did teach me this choreography. And before that, you know, sometimes people will say like, oh, they didn't invent that. Well, there was never a dance in a giant martini or champagne glass in 1930s and 40s American burlesque, or any burlesque. It's very much like, it was like kind of like mythological art, you know, the girl in the glass was like a thing, and Catherine really invented this like dance that is like this spinning, these poses, and then of course we evolved it together when we met, and you know, that's how it came to be.
It's so much part of your signature.
Yeah. And I became known for this act, and Catherine's still my like closest collaborator. We make my best burlesque numbers have all been in partnership with her.
And am I right in thinking that you had to teach Taylor Swift to do it? That must have been a fun thing.
It was fun.
Actually, I saw the YouTube video. I'm like, she was having problems with the stockings.
Yes, and those were full fashion stockings. I was very insistent when we did that with her, like, people and her stylist. I said, listen, if we're gonna do this, she's gonna have to wear like what I wear, like Louboutins. I connected her with the Louboutin Atelier. It was like Louboutin full fashion stockings, Swarovski crystal corset created by Catherine Delish, and we're gonna do this together. And it was, you know, it was really fun to kind of like immerse her in my world.
She was obviously horrified when she broke the stocking. I was like, oh my God.
You know, there's some things you take. I guess I take for granted. I've been doing it, you know, for a long time, and it's easy.
It's easy.
But, you know, I can't sing a note.
But the charm. So the way I've done the charm, which you might have been a bit surprised by, but I love the fact when I was researching, I love the fact that actually it's a cocktail glass, but there's a martini glass and a coupe. So I've done it on part of my spinning series. So you can see it's a diamond frame with a 2-dimensional coin kind of in the middle of it. The coin spins within the frame. So I love the whole idea, because I'm like, it seems to speak to what you do quite a lot. And on one side is the champagne coupe. And I've put a little strawberry and pink sapphires on the edge of the glass. And the martini glass had to have the trademark olive.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's made of savorites, the green savorites. And the whole thing will spin perfectly. But I didn't want to do it as a completely traditional champagne, coupe, because it's been done before. And
I have a vintage martini charm, which I actually had that enamel had worn off the green olive, and I went in and painted it myself.
Oh, you did, but yeah. Because that's so fun. Really reminds me. I mean, I guess what people don't realize is that you really what's the word?
Choreograph.
That's the word. Thank you. Choreograph your shows, don't you?
Well, kind of. I mean, the thing is, I spoke of Catherine, who's been my right hand in everything. I've worked with a few different choreographers, but most of the things are just me. Like, I'm going to go out there and do this. Like I have a choreographer that I work with in Las Vegas that the thing she does the most is, she's gotten to know me and know what I like and don't like. And I'm kind of the person that, and everyone knows this has ever worked with me as a dancer, is like the things that I want to learn, I will learn. But then some of it, I'm like, I don't see the point in doing that. Like, I don't, it's working. It's like, I never want to come across as someone who's trying to dance beyond my means, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think less is more.
Totally authentic.
There's a lot of power in stillness. And you can see that when you watch someone like Sid Charisse, who is an extraordinary dancer, but like, some of her best moments on screen are like less, and you can't even describe how it is that she's doing it. But it's not about the high kicks. It's not about the number of pirouettes. It's like, really, there's something about that essence of like stillness sometimes that kills me in dance. Like, it's what I love about dance.
But it's such a life lesson anyway, isn't it? But less is more.
Yeah.
It's so much about that. But you're, very much in charge of your own destiny. Is that true through the other businesses that you created?
Yeah, I mean, I think about my other businesses. My most important one, I think, is my lingerie line. I've had it for about 15 years, It's not like a Skims line, it's very beautiful lace lingerie, very wearable in everyday life. I was walking through Selfridges and I thought, oh yeah, and they used to carry my lingerie there for many years. But then I was like, oh, it's all Skims now.
Oh my God. So it's called Dita Von Teese. If anyone wants to look it up.
Yeah. So I've been
online.
Yeah. It's mostly online. Like once the pandemic hit, we found that more important than some of the department stores were the mom and pop retailers who were actually showing it and doing socials and showing unboxing videos, and people who really like the brand and wear the brand and can speak to it.
Yeah.
I just kind of like, it was great being in Bloomingdale's and all these big department stores, but now you can't even compete with the Spanx and Skims of the world. Yeah.
But all ironically,
for that
they're all trying to look like you. That's what's trying to happen. Gosh. So Dita, your next charm is Alistair, the Devon Rex cat.
Yeah.
So tell me about Alistair. I had fun doing this, actually. I had really fun doing this one.
I love this one. So Alistair was my soulmate kitty. Devon Rex, for people that know, they were a breed from the 50s first. Came about in the 50s, and they have curly hair. Like Rex refers to a curly coat, which Rex rabbits. There's other kinds of Rex animals, and they're kind of the intelligent breed. And I guess about 25 years ago, I was like looking to get a cat, and I started researching types of cats, and I just went, oh wow, this sounds like the cat for me. Like they call them a dog in a cat suit, and they're very social and full on. Like they're not the cat for everyone. Like sometimes people say, oh, I gotta get one of those cats, and I go, no, you don't, because like you can't leave that cat home while you're away for 2 days.
Okay,
so this is like you've got to like, you treat it like a dog or a family member. It's not like an aloof cat. They're social. They're on you. They're shoulder cats. Anyway, so Alistair was my soulmate kitty, and I had him for 17 years. He traveled all over the world with me. He was in Paris with me when I lived between Paris and LA. He was really like a social media star. He was like a beautiful black kitty with like what you call black smoke, which means they have kind of like a white undercoat but black tips. And he was just like this amazing animal. Like he was on tour with me. I even brought him out on stage for a standing ovation once, because he was on tour with me, and all of my fans like were following his his path.
He might have had an Instagram account.
Yes,
If he was
did. And I brought him on stage in front of like 3,000 people, and it didn't faze him at all. He was just like this cool cat that was just unbothered by things. And he passed away in 2020, and it was really hard for me because he was such like a part of my life for 17 years.
I could feel like a child.
You know how it is. Animal lovers know how it is.
But you said to me in your note, you said, I'm even looking for mourning jewelry to carry some of his fur.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, well, let's see if we could do this. So I've done him. I've just done his head. And he's actually a locket. So at the front of his head, as you could see, is absolutely, for those people who are listening but can't see, you'll have to look up a Devon Rex cat. But he is kind of dark grey diamonds at the top of his head. I've put him in kind of white gold because I think you described as quite grey and black. So the insides, you'll see the inside of his ears, so they'll be textured but white gold. And then he's got green Savarite eyes, and I don't know whether that's correct.
He had yellow eyes.
Okay, so so we'll have to make them. We'll make them sapphire.
My last kitty who passed away just a week ago, she has green eyes, so it made me actually think of her too. And I was sort of like, oh,
she was also a Devon Rex. Yes. And you can see I've put the little whiskers, so they'll be black rhodium. And he's smiling, but at the back is a sapphire glass door, so that actually you could put his little fur inside. So but cats clearly, I mean, so you're a cat person.
I've had dogs too. I have on my charm bracelet, I have dachshunds on there because I had 2 dachshunds that lived to be 17 and 18.
Oh, wow, that's a good age.
Yeah. All of my animals up until last week have lived to be over 17, which is kind of,
So is it by chance, because we haven't really talked about the taxidermy situation.
Right.
So tell me a bit about that. I'm assuming they're not.
I did not have my animals taxidermy.
Okay,
no.
just
although there was I did when Alistair died. One of my friends, who's this incredible artist named Christine McConnell, she has she has a TV show. Anyway, she's kind of like a famous crafter, like the ultimate crafting. Like she makes these fantastical cakes. She can make anything. Cakes. She decorates house. She knocks down walls. She's like incredible. She's just an artist. In fact, like she doesn't wear any store-bought clothes. She makes only her own clothes. She just can do anything. Anyway, she said, can I make a coffin for Alistair? And she carved this beautiful artwork out of a solid piece of wood and spent 30 days doing it. And it's exquisite. And so we actually put him in the coffin and had a funeral for him. But then we were like, I can't put this in the ground. So there was discussion, do we taxidermy him and put him in there and just lock it? And he's just he's in there. But I still haven't done anything. He's in a very famous taxidermist biological storage, because I couldn't really, you kind of have to let things like that have space before you do anything.
So your final charm is a heart pierced by swords. But it's also it's just rather beautiful. I mean, I'm presuming you've got lots of these.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do.
No, you're familiar with this kind of jewelry. It's very...
Could you tell us a bit about it?
I think it's more in vintage jewelry, right? A little, I don't know. I think I have some 40s dresses that have brooches that came on them that are, I have a lot of jewelry with swords piercing hearts. And for some reason, I just find them really fascinating, because to me, it is kind of like a relic of the past. And what does it mean? And for me, I've always felt like it means a little bit there is a lot of pain in life, and whether it's heartbreak or relationships or grief. And I think about that dagger to the heart all the time, and how when you're a grown woman, you've probably experienced a lot of different feelings like that, and I don't think that necessarily love has always come easy to me. Like, and, you know, when I meet people, I'm so fascinated with you met when you were 14 and you've been together ever since. But however, that doesn't mean that you haven't had daggers in your heart.
No,
You've been together forever, right?
Of course not. No.
So I don't know. I just love this imagery of swords and hearts, and it's a little bit like the, you know, like medieval
heraldic kind of
heraldic.
bit.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. So
I mean, it's kind of the sword, you know, as you said, represents power, justice, symbolizing strength and the courage to accept, you know, failure and go forth.
Yes,
I guess.
Yeah.
No, I think we'd make a beautiful charm. So you can see I've done it kind of Gothic style heart. It is a locket. The front of the heart is small pave rubies or sapphires. We'll see, one would be dark pink and one would be kind of redder. And it's got it's the sword itself is yellow gold handle. It's a yellow gold handle with a kind of pattern like on the handle, but the actual blade, if you like, is in white gold, piercing. You can see piercing through the rubies, and coming out the other end, and then it's a briolette ruby stone to represent the kind of the blood drop. And then on the back I've just left it plain gold because I actually thought it could be used to lots of things. It could have a photograph in it. It could have all sorts of different things for you to decide. Yes. But you know, you have had some heartbreak as well as having this incredibly successful, rather amazing career. You know, I mean, famously, you were married to Marilyn Manson. Tell me a bit about that, because that must have happened when you were...
I mean, I've been divorced from him now for 20 years, yet it still always is a thing people like to ask me about.
I guess because he's so iconic in his own right. I guess that's what it is.
You know, controversial, and of course, like, it was not an easy experience. Like, you know, we've all know how it feels to, like, break up with someone just in general, but then when you're doing it with people watching, or when you're looking, you know, somebody's in the nail salon flipping through a tabloid magazine of your relationship, you're like, wow, this is like a next level breakup. So yeah.
How did you meet? Did you meet on the Fetish kind of?
No, not at all. He wasn't involved in that kind of thing at all. I think it was under the guise of me performing in a music video.
Okay.
And and I was dating somebody different, famous.
Famous.
I will not name the name. That guy had been in a pretty long relationship with somebody, a famous actor.
Yeah.
Which I never even mention him because it's great. People don't ask me about him because they don't know.
Perfect.
And so, yeah, like and I had a hard time with him. It's like, you know, dating people in show business is never easy. So I was kind of like, you know, looking for the nail in the coffin, as we say, so I could go into another difficult relationship. But yeah, maybe I haven't always had great judgment in men. I don't know. I mean, you know what? Even when you have good judgment in people, but rock stars maybe aren't the first choice.
But I mean, listen, you are 52.
That's right.
I mean, who'd know that? But how? Retirement, what's that? I mean,
I don't know.
Long?
I thought, like, for sure I've retired myself many times.
Have you?
Yes. I think when you're 25, everyone puts the fear in you about being 30. Then you're 30, everyone puts the fear in you about being 35 and 40. And then, you know, it just like is an endless cycle of like instilling fear in young women. And I think back and I'm like, God, and even now I still say, oh, well, I mean, 60, that's it, you know, but I don't know because I've been wrong every time. So, you know, if I had quit when I said I was going to quit every time, I would not have a big, fabulous show in Las Vegas right now.
Would you have, was the thinking for quitting because of age? Was it because of, you know?
Yeah, it was totally about age and people's putting it on me of like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's always that question, like in interviews, since I first started doing interviews, like, what are you going to do when you're too old to do this? And I thought, well, first of all, what's too old to you? What's too old to me? I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. And then I think ultimately, again, like I always say, one thing people love about coming to my shows is they like seeing themselves reflected perhaps in different performers with different body shapes. I have just as many male performers in the show as female. It's like there's all these things that I feel like they stand for something, and people need to see examples of beauty and sensuality and eroticism and fun on stage. And if I'm not going to do it and say, well, I can't do that at age 50. Like I like to stand up and say, like, I'm going to, because it means something to me to see someone who's older than me setting an example of what you can be. Well,
what an example you have set for the next generation.
Thank you.
Now, Dita, I would love to make you one of these charms to say thank you.
So fabulous.
So, I don't know. I have no idea.
I've got to have a think on it. What do you
got to decide.
Oh, I know.
You can think, but you got to decide.
I have to think about that. I mean, the ruby and heart locket, it's also like, oh, there is jewelry like that, but I've never seen one with a locket. That's for sure. That's the problem. I'm so indecisive.
It's very wearable, that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, it would look great.
Yeah, like very fashion, a fashion look. And
yeah, I mean, I think
that's pretty special.
It'd look pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of like, I just feel like it's very unusual and like, a conversation.
Well, I tell you what happened? Why don't we do this? If you think that's the one, why don't we put some little carved lilac flowers inside it?
Oh, that could be nice.
It could be nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There won't, there'll be 2 or 3 little carved amethyst lilac flowers, and then that takes care of care of the whole.
Yeah, so like the same kind. Yeah,
because that, in fact, we'll do that, and they won't come out because we'll make sure that they are attached inside. So when you open the locket, you won't lose them.
Yeah.
And then maybe that takes care of that.
Okay.
Because I can see you really wearing this.
Yeah, like I'd wear it a lot.
And this one will mean a lot to you, but I'm not convinced.
Right, it might be too like sweet, and it's
that's like a bit more attitude in this one.
Right,
like
more attitude.
That's more you, I think.
Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful. And hopefully you're going to spend more time in London.
Yeah.
Because
I'll be back very soon.
Thank you for joining us on My Life in Charms. If today's conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own story, begin your Life in Charms journey at Annoushka.com or email bespoke@Annoushka.com. And don't forget to follow or subscribe to hear more extraordinary stories told in jewels.